We can argue all night about this.
Let's do it. I'm up for arguing all night.
Net zero.
I can't think of anything better.
So I agreed to go on Nigel Farage's show last week, but we were a bit late. And when I got there, I realised, as I got into the studio, that I was in for a real treat of both Nige and Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Webster is the founder of the Save British Farming campaign and joins me live in the studio. I was out there watching. I mean, it was all really it was well done, but the passion's there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And lovely to meet you, Nige.
Good to meet you. What confused me, you may have heard what I said there, all sorts of different signs on the tractors. You know, signs about, no farmers, no food. Signs about cheap imports. Signs about the behaviour of the supermarkets. Issue after issue after issue.
Actually, we made it abundantly clear what our three issues are. We want to ban substandard imports, and we want to ban those substandard imports having a British flag on them. And we want a food plan to ensure food security. But Nigel doesn't want to look at the detail of what we're asking about, because the reason that we're in such a mess is because he wanted Brexit and he promised these substandard imports because he promised everyone cheap food.
And I think the commonest sign really that I saw was around food security. This feeling that the government aren't that bothered how much of our own food we produce.
Well, I'd go further than that. They're not bothered at all.
Not bothered at all. So do you feel that agriculture is a very low priority?
Well, when Boris Johnson took office in 2020, there was a leaked memo, I don't know if you remember, the Daily Mail reported it, that Britain doesn't need farmers anymore. And, to this day, I think that's exactly what is unfolding. But as we know, with, the promises to bring in cheaper food for Britain. We always had the cheapest food, actually, in Europe and the highest standards. And now we have, it's not necessarily cheap imports, they're substandard imports. They're imports which are of lower quality than we produce ourselves, and they are undercutting us and putting us out of business.
Is that in terms of animal husbandry, or what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, everything. It's down to how the animals are kept. It's also down to how the food is grown. Whether it's arable or whether it's vegetables, fruits or animals. Animals are also regularly administered with antibiotics. We only use antibiotics if the animals are ill. So all of those things mean that for the competition, they're able to make that product at a cheaper price than we are, and we're getting undercut. And not only that, even within the UK, which is astonishing, the English farmer is the worst off, because the Welsh farmers and the Scottish and the Northern Ireland farmers still have food subsidies. The English government actually withheld the impact assessment about what SFI and ELMS is going to do. They started removing our subsidies as soon as we left the European Union. And so we are by far the worst off.
Yeah, I mean,
because Welsh farmers and Scottish farmers are still getting food subsidy. We are not.
And as I see it, the UK is spending $3 billion a year on farming subsidy, not $6 billion, but it appears we're not doing
Boris
it
Johnson
very effectively.
He promised us, actually, that out of the European Union we'd be well looked after and supported, and we'd probably end up with more subsidy. Well, that hasn't happened. Far from it.
Subsidies, thank you. We, as I just said, we would guarantee 100% that we would want to support farming in the way that it is currently supported and make sure that the rural economy is properly looked after. It's a no-brainer for this country. It's a massive, massive, important part of our lives, of our culture, and of the British way of life. Any government is going to want to support the rural economy in the way that it is. But to repeat my point, you could repeal regulation and you could make sure that you'd have extra money.
We're spending pretty much the same, but I'll get Jacob Rees-Mogg in on this in a moment's time.
No, but Jacob likes hormone-fed meat from Australia.
No. What Jacob likes...
I know the farmers remember that too.
You're right.
But you're calling for hormone-injected beef from Australia because it's cheaper. If people want to eat it, they should...
What Jacob wants is what I want, which is fair labelling. And one of the other complaints in Parliament Square today was about food labelling. So this little red tractor that we see when we buy something, does that mean that it's a wholly British or English product?
At the moment, what we're seeing is a British flag on imported food, and there's a small print saying product of Brazil or South Africa or
so
wherever.
How does it get a British flag?
Because it's processed here or packaged here.
Right.
And it's absolutely outrageous. And a lot of people are picking up packets of food thinking it's British and high quality, and it's not. So we think that's really a simple thing that can be fixed very quickly.
So really, talking to you, being out there earlier on today, and I've met the odd farmer in a pub in Kent here and there over the
Not
years.
all of the Kent today.
I know they are. I haven't drunk with all of them, I promise. But it seems there's a whole mass of individual issues.
Everything's related.
They're all interlinked.
Everything's related. And it's actually quite simple.
But for a campaign to be successful, there has to be one big push, one big drive. What is it here? Is it to get the British government to listen?
We're going into an election. The Conservatives really are on borrowed time. How many of them are going to come back next election depends on your former party, whether they split the vote. But we're not just talking to the Tories, we're also talking to Labour, because we want to see some flesh on the bones of their manifesto. We want to know what's coming. We are not going to rest on our laurels. This is the beginning.
OK. And what have Labour said so far on agricultural policy?
They have guaranteed that there will be a veterinary agreement, and that makes us feel a lot happier. We really don't want to accede to CPTPP. It means regulation, harmonisation. It means hormone-fed meat, and we really don't want that.
Well, very, very interesting indeed.
It'll be cataclysmic for us. We won't survive it.
I'm going to watch this development, Liz Webster, very, very carefully indeed. Now, Jacob, we were spending about £6 billion a year on agricultural subsidy. I used to joke half of it went to France. It wasn't quite half, but a lot did. Are we spending the £3 billion?
Well, the problem is that we're spending it on encouraging people not to farm, which seems to me to be a great mistake. We're putting it into these wild environmentalist causes rather than saying what we need to do is back farmers to produce food, which I'm strongly in favour of, but I'm not in favour of protectionism and higher prices for consumers, because I believe our farmers can compete globally. If I visit some Somerset farmers, they are extremely efficient and highly competitive and innovative, and we need to encourage the best.
And it's a high-end product.
It's a high-end product.
Which was one of the points that was being made earlier.
And that we have to focus on what we are good at. And what our protectionism does at the moment is protects Irish beef farmers, French beef farmers and Dutch beef farmers, as opposed to buying cheaper beef from Australia. I have no desire
Jacob,
to protect EU farms.
The problem is that we live in the Northern Hemisphere and we have a very difficult climate. So actually, and we know this because when the Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, we know darned well what happened to agriculture.
It led to...
The repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846 ensured that the 90% poorest in the country were better off at the expense of the 10%. However, for agriculture, because all of the food was imported from particularly the Americas, but also the rest of the Commonwealth, it meant that British agriculture went into depression and self-sufficiency dropped to 30%, which was a problem when we had 2 world wars and we couldn't feed ourselves, which is why we joined the European Union after World War II for food security and food supply.
Bread, it made the society much better off.
This has been an argument going on for 150 years.
It's simply wrong. British agriculture didn't collapse at that point. There was a glut in the market 30 years later, which comes much after the Corn Laws.
Well, obviously, things were much slower in those days. It took a long time for that to impact.
Actually, do you know what? The principles of that debate and this debate are not dissimilar.
No, that's
They're
right.
not dissimilar.
It's very, very... I always go on about the Corn Laws. It's my favourite subject.
No. And it was a wonderful upwelling and grassroots campaign and all the rest of it. But whether we have a Conservative or a Labour government, do you actually think that a Labour government will be any closer or more connected to your community than this Conservative one?
The Labour government... it's in their interest to make sure that Britain has got food. And with the way the world is right now, we're in a very fragile situation, which is why we need food security. And every farmer I know talks about food security because we understand how much less food is being
We better have a look at net zero commitments too, but another time.
Net zero commitments it'll be wind farms.
Enough. We can argue all night about this.
Let's do it. I'm up for arguing all night.
Net zero.
I can't think of anything better.
Zero is a part of this problem.
Well, we'll have to wait and see if I get asked back on to Nigel's show to continue this great argument another time. Hope you've enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe, comment below, let me know what you think.